We've been doing this, acting as organized skeptics for 25 years now, and it's been a lot of fun. And you might wonder, what could keep a skeptic busy in this town for 25 years? Well, I'm going to take just a few minutes, because I'm not one of the feature speakers, but I just wanted to sort of give you guys a little introduction and a personal reflection on some of the things that have caught my interest and have kept my skeptical brow raised for the last 25 or so years. Like I said, there's a lot to be skeptical around here, but that's not exactly where I want you to look. I want you to look down here. Those are yogic flyers, here to participate in this case, the 1990 Transcendental Meditation Yogic Flying Olympics. In one of my fondest memories with the group, Jamie Ian Swiss, James Randi, and I attended this event, held downtown at the time, the Omni Showroom, and we represented the press. We were reporters for the NCAS Skeptical Eye, signed in as press. They were happy to have us. And we sat there that afternoon, and we watched very athletic young people sit in the full lotus position, bouncing on their butts on foam mattresses, competing in long jump, high jump, and various races. I understand that they expect to achieve full flight within a few years. Always a few more years. They've been saying that since 1990.
You the only press?
Oh, no. Actually, it was very well attended. We were perhaps the most dubious press. A little while later, a couple of years later, the TMers came back to Washington, this time in an effort to see if they could reduce the crime rate in D.C. They brought hundreds of meditators in town for the summer to meditate and psychically try to reduce the crime rate in D.C. They claimed victory. Well, Well, as a matter of fact, they claimed victory, but yeah, you're right. The murder rate actually went up. But they claimed success because they said, well, it would have been even worse if they hadn't meditated. And you know, it's hard to avoid politics in this town. The Natural Law Party, which happens to be the political arm of the Transcendental Meditation Group, they put forward John Hagelin, PhD in physics, as their presidential candidate for election years 1992, 96, and 2000. He did not win. Now, Phil Klass, as Grace mentioned, was one of our founding mentors for the group. Without Phil, it's very likely this group would not have gotten off the ground the way we did. He also was known as the Sherlock Holmes of UFOs. He was, without any doubt whatsoever, the greatest demystifier, investigator and demystifier of all things relating to UFOs and alien encounters. And we honor Phil each year by giving an award for excellence in promoting scientific thinking and critical thinking. We will actually have a short video at the end of the program this afternoon for this year's award. Now, although there have been a few UFO sightings in the Washington area over the years, and July of 1952 represents perhaps the most well-known. There were actually multiple events that July. One, a radar sighting at National Airport, another visual sighting near the Capitol, as you see here. Washington has not exactly been a hotbed of UFO activity, of alien encounters or anything. Nonetheless, this organization has tried to carry on Phil's tradition, and current board member Scott Snell, sitting right here, and former board member Jim Giglio have both been very active in investigating various reports and talking to the media about them. Jim Giglio also spearheaded a major initiative for this group a few years ago in which he contacted the University of Colorado. He obtained their permission for us to publish an internet edition of the Condon Report, which had been commissioned by the Air Force and stands to this day as perhaps the most comprehensive report on a variety of UFO sightings, and certainly one of the most scientifically based and critical in that field. That report is at the NCAS website, and to this day it has gathered over 180,000 hits at our website. It is a great resource. Now, standing, or rather sitting, at Scott Circle, downtown in D.C., is the statue of Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy. Now, I'm not going to say a lot about homeopathy. I would imagine most people here probably know a little bit about it. This particular monument, I was curious how this came to be and did a little bit of historical research on this. It seems that this monument was funded and promoted by the American Institute of Homeopathy and dedicated downtown by President William McKinley in the year 1900. So it's been down there for a while. Now, since that time, homeopathy as a practice has faded and then risen again. And right now, you can go in almost any supermarket, pharmacy, drugstore, and pick up homeopathic remedies for just about anything that you can imagine. Homeopathy is one of those things based on the idea of two things. That is, similars cure similars. If you find a substance that creates a symptom in a healthy person, then the same substance in the right dose supposedly will cure that symptom. The other part of it is even a little more bizarre, and that says the weaker the dose, the more effective it is. And so a little bit counterintuitive there. In any case, Washington has this long history from 1900 through present day. In 1991, Congress established the Office of Alternative Medicine at the NIH, pretty much against the will of the rest of the NIH at the time. It was really very much the personal project of Senator Tom Harkin, who, as far as I can tell, believes, well, just about everything. But I will tell you that in 2009, Harkin told a Senate hearing that he was actually disappointed in this entity that he created. He said, quote, "One of the purposes of this center was to investigate and validate alternative approaches. Quite frankly, I must say publicly that it has fallen short." So it sounds like to me that he was actually looking for a rubber stamp to validate rather than actually critically investigate. Skeptics, on the other hand, have complained about the very same entity, the center, which started as an office and has now grown to be the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. Skeptics like us have often complained that this particular organization does science that's a little too squishy and too soft. So they're catching it on both sides. Now, I can tell you, personally, I had a great opportunity. I worked at the NIH for 10 years. And that was during the period when we started this group. But a few years later, when I was at the University of Maryland, I was recruited by Wayne Jonas, who was one of the earlier directors of the Office of Alternative Medicine. And Wayne asked me to be the skeptical statistician on a funded research project that he was beginning. He put together a small team to see if we could duplicate and replicate some of the claims being made by Dr. Jacques Benveniste from France, who had, in 1988, turned the world, well, that's a little strong. He had created quite a controversy when the journal Nature published a paper of his that seemed to lend credence to some of the homeopathic claims. It became associated with what they called water with a memory, in which he was basically claiming that the molecules of water could remember a substance that they had previously been in contact with, and that's why homeopathy worked. So he said. Well, that paper has since been largely debunked, although it is still frequently cited by those who promote homeopathy. But 10 years later than that, in 1999 or so, Benveniste came forward with an even more remarkable claim. He said that he could take a biological signal, record it using a computer sound card and put it into a WAV file, and then play it back to plain water and activate that water so it became an effective homeopathic cure. Wayne Jonas recruited me to be on a research team to see if we could actually replicate this. And we actually worked with Benveniste and his team from France. They sent over equipment, they sent over technicians, and we spent some weeks seeing if we could get the effect that he was looking for. Let me quote our own paper that we published in 2006. Our conclusion, our team found no replicable effects from digital signals. No surprise there. However, what we didn't actually put in the paper, at least not too strongly, what we did find was that the strange effects that Benveniste was looking for did appear, but only and I want to emphasize only, when one of Benveniste's own lab assistants broke protocol and manually manipulated the data collection devices. Madam Flora, for those of you from College Park, you know this location. DC is full of storefront psychics. This is just one example close to home for some of us. They can be kind of shady operations, but that's actually not really what I want to talk about, since these are pretty common everywhere. What sets Washington apart from perhaps other cities with psychics are the connections to politics. Going way back, Mary Todd Lincoln was a devout spiritualist. She brought mediums into the White House and held seances there. From what we can tell, the president was somewhat skeptical, never mind the ghostly image of him hovering over her shoulder in a spirit photograph taken by a spirit photographer shortly after his assassination. But fast forward, 100 years later than that photo was taken, Jean Dixon, who had become perhaps the country's best-known psychic at the time. She rose to fame because she had supposedly predicted that JFK would be assassinated. What's less talked about is that she also predicted that JFK would not get elected in the first place. So kind of winning on both sides there. She also supposedly was a psychic advisor to First Lady Nancy Reagan. And she was not the only one. At about the time that NCAS was really getting going, another psychic rose to fame in the press. Her name was Joan Quigley, and she became known as the astrologer to the Reagans. And in her own autobiography, she took credit for influencing policy with the Soviet Union, for convincing the President Reagan to initiate the Star Wars weapons program. She wrote, and I'm going to quote her here because her words are just perfect, "Not since the days of the Roman emperors, and never in the history of the U.S. presidency, has an astrologer played such a significant role in the nation's affairs." Yeah. But let's not forget some of the other stuff that went on. There was a whole psychic arms race in this town, or in the military in this town. We were competing with the Russians, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of psychic ability. There was the psychic arms race. There was the so-called Stargate program, in which the military employed so-called remote viewers or clairvoyants to try to psychically locate targets and gather other kinds of information. The program was actually, at that point, transferred over to the CIA, who was somewhat skeptical. They asked several people, scientists, to review the work. And a longtime friend of the National Capital Area Skeptics, psychologist Ray Hyman, well-known skeptic and well-known critic of parapsychology, was part of that research team that reviewed the Stargate data. His conclusion in that was that nothing useful had come from it, and shortly after that, the CIA shut the program down. NCAS doesn't claim credit for that one, but we were certainly pleased. But these are just kind of a few personal examples of places where the organization or myself personally have bumped up against stuff that has kept us interested, kept us busy, kept us skeptical for 25 years or so. I'm very proud that this organization has been able to serve as an information resource for both the public and for the media. I think it's just been a great thing. Some of my other personal highlights in recent years, I've been asked to be a skeptical consultant and statistician. In my mind, those are practically the same thing. For a couple of TV programs, I did something for National Geographic TV on a so-called psychic parrot. And more recently, the Mythbusters have asked me to contribute a little bit behind the scenes. So that's been kind of fun for me, and certainly I am proud that the organization has had these kinds of opportunities. But I have to say that probably the most rewarding thing for me over the 25 years has been seeing the growth of skeptical communities, not just NCAS, but many other organizations, both local and national. We have seen folks from the early NCAS Board of Directors created the Washington Area Secular Humanists, which remains to this day a very strong forum for those people interested in humanist values and scientific literacy and critical thinking. We've done joint programs with them. The Society of Inquiry at the University of Maryland is a student group that I'm very proud to be their faculty mentor. And this group has sponsored for the last 2 years a program called Skeptic, a grassroots program organized from the ground up of anyone who really wants to speak, and done that in partnership with both NCAS and CFIDC. They'll be doing it again this fall, so stay tuned if you're interested. It's a great thing to attend. Drinking Skeptically is a little social movement that started not here in Washington. It started up in New York, but it has spread around the country, and there are many flavors of it now, some sponsored by NCAS, some sponsored by CFI in this region. There's even an online version, a virtual Drinking Skeptically, sponsored by our own Brian Gregory. And we've seen the growth of other online communities that have made it easier and easier for skeptics and those concerned about critical thinking and scientific-based skepticism to find each other and grow. So for a long, long time, when talking to folks about who I was, why was I a skeptic, I had to explain what that meant. I had to explain that we were skeptics, not cynics. And it was not cool to be a skeptic. But at last, I think something's changed. I really do. I think it's catching on. I think it's cool to be a skeptic. I think we're seeing a lot more stuff going on, a lot more reflected in the general public, a lot more critical thinking. Sure, there's some soft spots, and we have a lot more to do, but I'm very pleased. You're cool. We're all cool to be skeptics. Thanks.